So on Thursday we had two by-elections in England, one in Stoke-on-Trent Central, one in Copeland, both previously Labour seats. Labour kept Stoke-on-Trent, they lost Copeland. Governments don't really win by-elections, so that's a big loss for Labour. More of that in a second. Let's start with Stoke-on-Trent. It's a major feat for Labour to keep Stoke, a major accomplishment. Don't let the media bullshit artists let you think otherwise, okay? It's a big deal. We were told 3-4 months ago that this could be Corbyn's Waterloo. Dan Jarvis and Frank Field said that with the election of Paul Nuttall as UKIP leader, the UKIP fox was in the Labour henhouse. 70% of Stoke voted to leave in last year's EU referendum, and the likes of Farage and Paul Nuttall, and let's be honest, some Labour MPs too, thought that that would translate to electoral success for UKIP. It hasn't. And I think a line has been drawn in the sand. Because if they'd won this seat in Stoke-on-Trent Central, you can imagine the headlines, can't you? Corbyn has to go. In 2020, UKIP will win 10, 20, 30 seats. What happened in Scotland in the May 2015 election with the SNP? What happened in England's industrial towns and cities with the UK Independence Party? Well, that fantasy, that bullshit now seems as distant and as pathetic as Paul Nuttall's storybook resume, which is important because it could have happened, okay? It hasn't happened because of an outstanding ground campaign by Labour activists in Stoke. Different story in Copeland, isn't it, though? It's a big seat, yes, we can make our excuses. Difficult to do doorstep stuff when you've got such a big area to cover. It was a small majority, it wasn't a safe seat, it was a small majority. And yes, the issue of nuclear energy in Sellafield was hugely important, and it's locally specific. And Corbyn wasn't trusted. And that's not the case for every seat. There's not a nuclear power station or Trident in every seat. But despite the fact that all being true, like I say, governments don't win by-elections, and that's a major problem for Labour. But guess what? I have a hypothesis which explains Labour defeat in Copeland and victory in Stoke. And I think the same trend is driving both of those outcomes. So hear me out. What is it? Well, it's the fact that UKIP are completely fucked. Why are they fucked? Because whether or not you agree with Corbyn's position on Article 50, they've lost their jet fuel. Theresa May going hard on Brexit has taken them to one side. Corbyn saying we respect Article 50 has kneecapped them on the other. Okay, that's why they're completely hobbled, effectively. woke Tim Farron is still saying resist Article 50. It's a pretty marginal position in British politics. UKIP are in trouble. Now, in Stoke, that meant that they couldn't make a breakthrough. That Brexit capital couldn't lead to UKIP's first seat won from Labour. Okay? In Copeland, it meant that UKIP switches to the Tories lost Labour a seat. And it's been parlour talk amongst UK, again, London-based really, that's the reality, bullshit artists, journalists. It's been the parlour talk to say that Labour voters are going to UKIP. Labour have more to fear from UKIP than the Tories. Bullshit. These were traditional values voters. These were voters obsessed with Europe and Euroscepticism. Okay? Farage used to be a Tory. Paul Nuttall used to be a Tory. Douglas Carswell used to be a Tory. Mark Reckless used to be... Are you seeing a pattern here? I'm seeing a pattern. They used to be Tories. Most of their voters used to be Tories. But this is a problem because in the 2015 general election, 4 million people voted for UKIP. Well, 3.9 million people. So that's a lot of votes that the Tories can take back. The context that Jeremy Corbyn is now facing is unbelievable, quite frankly. Yes, he's facing decades, really, of inertia and, quite frankly, collapse in the Labour vote, the Labour machine, yes. But simultaneously, right-wing values and ideas have never been more hegemonic in British society. If you look at general elections from 1983 to 2015, the left vote was always split, especially the 1980s. So Thatcher won election after election, but the point was the Liberal Democrat vote and the Labour vote combined were bigger than the Tory vote. It's just that this was two parties. And that was the case for pretty much every election until 18 months ago. And then UKIP and the Tories get 50% of the vote. And that was new. And that's big. And what it means now is that many of those people going back to the Tories, yes, of course Theresa May is polling 40%. Of course Theresa May has a shot at Copeland. Because this party, with 4 million votes, which has brought so many people together around such key issues, Euroscepticism, immigration, hating brown and black people, they're now going to gravitate towards the Conservative Party. And that's a huge challenge Corbyn and Labour and the left have to deal with, but fuck me. It's not of their making, okay? It really is not of their making. So how is it possible that Britain has 50% of the voting public going to the right, voting for UKIP and the Tories in 2015, when, like I say, for the 30 years previously, it'd been the opposite story? What changed? Well, I think 2015, for the SNP too, as well, right, and the Greens, but it's reflected most of all in the right-wing vote, is the expression of anger and distrust emanating from 20 years of free market fundamentalism, which has been adopted by all the mainstream parties. It's an anger and disgust at the fact that people will not deviate from market economics, no matter the cost, when it comes to jobs, pay, public services, quality of life. And most of all, of course, it came 7 years after the global financial crisis. The shit hit the fan. Lehman Brothers collapsed. AIG was bailed in. You remember Northern Rock? That was taken over by the taxpayer. We saw neoliberalism on its knees. And we, the taxpayer, bailed them out. We expected a different offer, especially from the left afterwards. And guess what? We never got it. We never got it. So I can totally understand the anger and the resentment towards elites. Corbyn's in trouble. Labour are floundering. What's the solution? Well, you don't step back, buddy. You stand up tall. You stand up tall. It is now or never for Labour, for Corbyn and for the left. So what does that need? Well, I could pep you up and be angry and be energetic and say we've got to, give it to the man, but that's not good enough. Labour needs to now do three things in the next few months. They need a coherent economic strategy with worked out policies on housing, on industrial strategy, on jobs, on healthcare, on energy, on infrastructure, on education. Everything needs to be very, very worked out. Because the problem in Stoke wasn't that people voting for UKIP or not voting for Labour or not voting at all. The problem for them wasn't, oh, Corbyn's outlandish, Corbyn's crazy, Corbyn's some unhinged leftist. That wasn't their problem. They said, I don't see the difference between him and Gordon Brown and David Cameron and Theresa May. He's the same as the rest of them. That's politics as usual. And that's what breaks my heart more than anything else. I would want them to say he's unhinged, because at least you're trying to express something, you're trying to make a political offer and it's being rejected. Right now it's not even being heard. So we need to have very worked out policies on a range of issues, a very clear political offer. Secondly, you have a plan about how you communicate that to people, because the print media aren't going to do that for us. So we need to find some money. Gary, you got some money? We haven't got any money because we're Enviro Media, we work low budgets. You need to find some money and you need to put it where your mouth is, okay? So trade unions, the Labour Party, high value individuals need to give money to the World Transformed, to Momentum, to Enviro Media, but also start new stuff. We need think tanks. We've got no think tanks, for heaven's sake. How do you expect Corbyn to have policies when all these guys hate him so much they're not even going to do anything? It's so weird that NEF has become basically a kind of like a, they knock on doors and they think they're a social movement. They're a think tank. They don't want to be a think tank because it would mean giving policies to Jeremy Corbyn. So we need institutions to build policy and to communicate with people. It takes money. It takes resources. So if you're serious about resisting a Britain where Theresa May gets 40% of the vote, where we go down a very dangerous path in immigration and the economy, especially after Brexit, if you're serious about that, put your grievances around Article 50 or, liking woke Tim Farron to the side and put some resources down. And at least try and rebuild something of a left hegemony. Resist these ideas and these values around xenophobia, around race, around a regressive economy built on whiteness and exclusion. And finally, this is for my boy JC, this is for the people around him, we need to start taking some risks. And it's difficult when you're in a big organisation like the Labour Party, it's like the Titanic, and it is a bit like the Titanic at the moment, isn't it, right? You can't steer stuff quickly because it's such a big vessel, it moves very slowly. We can't move slowly. They need a new approach around activism, around training people, around an activist academy. They need a new communications academy, use digital media better. If they don't, they are toast. They are fucked. We need to remember the dynamism, the optimism, the energy, the hope of those two leadership campaigns over the last couple of summers, and we need to step that up to the national level. And JC, my boy, that means taking some risks, and that means really putting yourself out on a limb here, because I think we've got maybe a year to not just change the Labour Party, but to change Britain. And that's got to be about more than just words. We've got to do stuff. We've got to convince people. Yes, that takes optimism and hope, but it takes a plan and resources. So let's do it.